Democratic spokesperson.
I just want to let you guys know
not.
I'm feeling a lot better after my beer. Let's talk about OpenAI. Come on.
All right, let's go. All right, so listen.
Let's talk about OpenAI.
All right, OpenAI is a company that builds artificial intelligence software and platforms. They have one platform called GPT. It is on its third version. As part of GPT-3, they created ChatGPT, which is a chat interface where you can ask questions to AI. The results are nothing short of stunning when they hit. Some of them are a little bit mixed, but Friedberg has spent the last 48 hours drinking White Russians with Oatly milk and playing with ChatGPT, including his question to the ChatGPT, which was write a script of Chamath, Sacks, and JCal talking about the future of AI in the style of a Quentin Tarantino movie. And I have to say, it was pretty great, the result. Go ahead, Friedberg, tell us what you discovered.
Wait, I think you guys should read this real quick. We can cut it out if it's stupid, but okay,
you want us to actually read the script?
Yeah,
I don't think I got the Quentin Tarantino part right. I mean, I think it was like impressive, but there's no F-bombs. There's no like Tarantino-esque dialogue.
Well, and by the way, they excluded all of that from OpenAI. They took out all cussing and violence from OpenAI.
That explains it, because if this was a Tarantino script, there would be some choice language in here.
But it's interesting. It's like the PG Tarantino script, because with no cussing, no violence, no sex.
There's no pop culture references.
Yeah, you do the narrative. Go ahead.
The scene opens on Chamath Palihapitiya, David Sacks, and Jason Calacanis sitting at a dimly lit table in a smoky bar. A bottle of whiskey sits in the center of the table, half empty. Chamath leaning forward, his eyes intense.
So, what do you guys think about this ChatGPT thing?
David Sacks takes a sip of his drink.
It's impressive, no doubt about it. A large language model trained by OpenAI that can generate human-like text in a variety of styles and formats. It's a game changer.
Jason nods.
Definitely. It's one of the most advanced AI systems we've seen to date. It's going to have a huge impact on the way we use and interact with AI.
Chamath frowns.
That's what I'm worried about. With a technology like this, the possibilities are endless, but so are the potential dangers.
Sacks leans back in his chair.
Oh, come on, Chamath. You're not still stuck on that whole AI is going to kill us all thing, are you?
Chamath leans forward again, his voice low and serious.
Look, I'm not saying that ChatGPT is going to turn into Skynet overnight, but we need to be careful about the way we develop and deploy AI. We need to make sure that we're using it for good and not just for our own gain.
JCal nods.
I agree. We need to make sure that we're responsible in the way we use AI, and that includes making sure it's accessible and affordable to everyone, not just a select few.
Chamath with a dirty smirk.
And let's not forget about the importance of regulation. We need to make sure that we have the right laws in place
Okay, this is
prevent misuse of AI.
The director's calling cut.
Cut. That's it. Scene.
Exit scene. We're not going to finish it.
It's not that far off. I mean, it's 60% of the way there.
I actually,
all you have to do is put in a Biden for Sacks. If you blame Biden, it would have been perfect.
Let me tell you guys something stunning about this this platform. So this is GPT 3.5, which is an interim model to what people are saying is the long-awaited GPT 4.0 model, which I think they announced in 2020 and has been in development for some time. So the model, this GPT 3.5 model, was trained in 3 steps. They do a great job explaining it on the OpenAI blog site, where they collect some data. And then there's a supervised model, meaning that there are humans that are involved in tagging. And then the model kind of, learns from that system. Then you ask the model questions, you get output. And then humans rank the output. And so the model learns through that ranking system. And then there's kind of this third optimization thing, and then it's fine-tuned. So the model itself has several steps of kind of human involvement, and kind of it sources its own data and builds it. You know what's incredible about this model? The total size of the software package that runs the model is about 100 gigabytes. Isn't that amazing? Like, you could fit this model on probably 20% of the storage space on your iPhone, and you could run this thing, and you could probably just talk to it for the rest of your life. And it's really kind of an incredible milestone. But I think what was so stunning to me about this, I know you guys are probably expecting something to be said like this, but you could see so many human knowledge worker roles and functions being replaced by this extraordinary interface. So kids can do homework. That's easy. Software engineers can get their code optimized and can get their code written for them. There's great examples of how software code has been written by this interface. You could see real estate, insurance, salespeople being replaced by some sort of software-like interface like this. Copywriters, make me 100 versions of a commercial or an ad that I can then use. Customer support completely replaced, right? If you guys remember, there were these automated customer support companies that started 2 decades ago.
Never
and there was
worked.
This great flurry. All BPO businesses were all about lower cost human labor. Now the cost of human labor goes to zero. My prediction, so everyone's got the obvious prediction, which is there's going to be 100,000 startups that are going to emerge. I mean, this is kind of like this moment where the internet came along and everyone's like, this changes everything. I do think everyone thinks and feels that. So the obvious next step is a bubble will form. And so
can I ask a technical question though, Friedberg? And then Chamath, you're probably thinking the same thing
Let
here.
me just finish my market prediction and then we'll do the. But I think because everyone's so hyped about this and we all know this,
it'll be
all
overfunded.
The VC attention, all the investor attention is shifting to this capability. And how do you apply this sort of capability across all of these different industries and all these different applications? And as a result, my guess is the next hype cycle, the next bubble cycle in Silicon Valley will absolutely be this generative AI business.
But this is a little technical, but how would it know the difference between like YOUR and UR when it is processing natural language if you were to do like your anus or Uranus? How would that, Friedberg, how would it know the difference between Uranus and your space anus?
It'll learn that,
It's a joke. It didn't land. Yeah. It was a joke about Uranus. It didn't land.
Try again.
I think I honestly think the AI probably would have made a better joke than that.
It would have made a better joke for sure. Somebody did it in our group chat and said, do intros like JCal, and they were terrible. So at least I have a job for another year.
How about we ask the AI to pretend you're the allinpod besties telling Uranus jokes?
That would be pretty hilarious.
Sorry, let me just say one more thing about this OpenAI thing. I do think that the biggest and most interesting thing to think about is how this will disrupt the search box. The search, the way search works at Google, and the internet search is there are these kind of servers, these web crawlers that go out and gather data. Some are structured data feeds, and some of them are just crawlers. And then that data is indexed, or in the structured way, it's kind of made available for serving directly on the search page. And so much of that is indexing. So I search for a bunch of keywords. Those keywords and perhaps with some natural language context are matched to a result page, and I click on that and it's linked out. Years ago, Google started a product called the One Box, where they could take structured data, like what is the weather in San Francisco today, and that top of the search result page just presented that data because it knows with high certainty the question you're asking, and it knows with high certainty the answer it can give you.
Yeah, clipped it from somebody's website, right?
So if that starts to become everything, then that one box interface, and it's not just Google's ability to access all this data and index it and serve it and store it. There could be a lot of competitors to the one box and a lot of competitors ultimately to search. And ultimately, Google's core product, their search engine, could be radically disrupted by an alternative system or set of systems that have more of a natural language chat interface. Which is literally why Google bought DeepMind, and there were a collection of human-powered search engines, Mahalo included, Chacha, Answers.com, who were trying to do the human-based version of this. It just didn't scale. We don't want to get ahead of ourselves, because one of the things we don't know is how much is going on in DeepMind. They're not very open like OpenAI is. They talk about some of the advanced frontier stuff like AlphaFold and so on, and they've been public about that. But a lot of that is really to generate interest and hype in what's next. But my understanding is DeepMind's been applied to everything from ad optimization, but also the ranking on YouTube videos to get people more engagement on YouTube, et cetera, et cetera. So there's all these ways that DeepMind's been applied within Google services that we don't see. And certainly within search. Yeah. But the question is there an entirely new interface for search that risks Google's core search business? And I think that there certainly will be a lot of money thrown at this. And if anyone has any interesting ideas, send me an email. Sacks and then Chamath.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. I saw a thread on this where somebody was asking GPT, a bunch of questions, like they were like generally like coding questions, and they were actually comparing the result in Google versus GPT. And Google would just give you a reference to like a link to some page, whereas GPT-3 would actually construct the answer, like a multi-paragraph answer that was far more detailed and in a way user-friendly.
Yeah.
And whereas like the Google page would kick you over to a reference where it was like this 1, 2, 3 sort of, maybe someone had created a checklist, but it just wasn't that detailed. It really is pretty interesting. I thought Andreessen tweeted a really interesting example as well, where he asked GPT to create a scene from a play starring a New York Times journalist and a Silicon Valley tech entrepreneur. They were arguing about free speech, and each passing asserts the view associated with his profession and social circle. We don't need to read the whole thing, but I thought this was like spot on, where I was actually like, both sides are making their best arguments, and it's like to each other in a conversation that seems intelligible. Like they're making their points at the right time in the conversation. It's like they're playing off each other. In other words, it actually reads like a conversation. I actually thought this one was more impressive than the one with the bestie impersonation, because
I agree.
I actually thought that the one about All In didn't really capture our personalities per se, but this one actually does a pretty good job capturing the arguments in this debate. So
Chamath,
pretty impressive.
any thoughts here?
Yeah, lots. I mean, I've been spending a lot of time learning about this area. 6 years ago, a team that I partnered with who was at Google that built TPU, we've been building silicon for this space. So we've been kind of going from the ground up for the last 6 years. A couple things that I'll say. The first is that I think we're going to replace SaaS with what I call MaaS, which is models as a service. And so, a lot of what software will be, particularly in the enterprise, will get replaced with a single use model that allows you to solve a function. So these chat examples are one, and you can name a bunch of SaaS companies that were purveyors of SaaS that'll get replaced by essentially GPT-3 or some other language model. And then there'll be a whole bunch of other things like that. If it's a, expense management company, they'll have a model that'll allow them to actually do expense management or blah, 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 forecasting better. So I think SaaS will get replaced over time with these models incrementally. That's phase one. But the problem with all of these models, in my opinion, is that they're still largely brittle. They are good at one thing. They are a single mode way of interfacing with data. The next big leap, and I think it will come from one of the big tech companies or from OpenAI, is, and I talked about this a few episodes ago, a multimodal model, which then allows you to actually bring together and join video, voice, data in a unique way to answer real substantive problems. So if I had to steel man the opposite side reaction, so I think there's a lot of people gushing over the novelty of GPT-3. If I had to, or ChatGPT, if I had to steel man the opposite, what I would say is it's going to get somewhere between 95 to 99% of all of these very simple questions right, because they're kind of cute and simple. There is no consequence of saying write a play because there is no wrong answer, right? You either kind of, it tickles your fancy or it doesn't. It kind of entertains you or it doesn't. When this stuff becomes very valuable is that when you really need a precise answer and you can guarantee that to be overwhelmingly right, that's the last 1 to 2% that is exceptionally hard. And I don't think that we're at a place yet where these models can do that. But when we get there, all of these models as a service will be very much commoditized. And I think the real value is finding non-obvious sources of data that feed it. So it's all about training. So meaning you can break down machine learning and AI into two simple things. There's training, which is what you do asynchronously. And then there's inference, which is what you're doing in real time. So when you're typing something into Chat API or ChatGPT, that's an inference that's running and then you're generating an output. But the real key is where do you find proprietary sources of data that you can learn on top of? That's the real arms race. So one example would be, let's say you build a model to detect tumors, right? There's a lot of people doing that. Well, the company that will win may be the company that actually then vertically integrates, buys a hospital system, and get access to patient data that is completely proprietary to them and covers the most number of women of all age groups and of all ethnic categories. Those are the kinds of moves in business that we will see in the next 5 to 10 years that I find much more exciting and trying to figure out how to play in that space. But I do think that ChatGPT is a wonderful example to point us in that direction. But I'm sort of more of that case, which is it's a cute toy, but we haven't yet cracked the 1% to 2% of use cases that makes it super useful. But I think the first step, but the first step will be the transformation of SaaS to mass. And then from there, we think we can try to figure this out.
It reminds me of, in a way, when you give that description of like, hey, this is really interesting, but it's not complete. Is remember when GPS came out and like people were like doing turn-by-turn navigation, they drive off the road because they were trusting it too much. And then, over 20 years of GPS, we're kind of like, yeah, it's pretty bulletproof, but keep your eyes on the road. Same thing that's happening. And these changes tend to be slow.
These last 100 or 200 basis points literally takes decades.
Exactly. So the last 15% of self-driving is like the decade-long, slog.
That may take a century. 15% may take a century. But the last 2% will take a few decades.
It's like the change happens very slowly and then all at once. For people who don't know what a TPU is, that's a tensor processing unit. This is Google's application-specific circuits, right? And
custom silicon that they invented for TensorFlow at the time.
Yeah, so if you want to try to...
Although now the modality of AI, we've changed that as well. So now we're totally in the world of transformers. So we're not even using... you're not letting the tensors flow the way